Today's episode may include content that audience members may find disturbing.
While every episode of Zuzu All Grown Up is uplifting and encouraging, today we'll be discussing a tragic event that gave way to an inspiring story.
Please review today's episode before allowing children to listen or watch.
Coming up on the next episode of Zuzu All Grown Up.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
You're now listening to Zuzu All Grown Up.
She's been featured in more than 20 films from the early days of film and television.
He is a psychotherapist and her loving husband.
Together, they are on a mission to brighten your day and your life.
It's a time to smile, a time to laugh, a time to expect more.
It's time to get inspired with your hosts, Karolyn Grimes and Dr. Brunell.
It's time to meet Zuzu All Grown Up.
Do you believe that life is wonderful in principle, but for some reason just isn't so consistently in practice? Every life will have its ups and downs. But have you ever thought that if there were only more people around you encouraging, uplifting, and even inspiring you, then life would be more fulfilling? If only people like George and Mary Bailey were in your inner circle, then life could truly be wonderful all the time? If so, we've got good news for you, because you can find such people on this podcast and at zuzunetwork.com. This podcast is the vision of Karolyn Grimes, Zuzu, and Dr. Brunell, illustrating how the timeless message of It's a Wonderful Life can be and is applied to our modern lives and situations. Indeed, when you take that message to heart, your life will become immeasurably more wonderful. Visit us at zuzunetwork.com and listen to this podcast series to learn more about how. Now sit back, relax, and get ready to enjoy another episode of Zuzu All Grown Up.
Coming up next on today's show, we have Darrell Scott, founder of Rachel's Challenge. He's the father of the first student killed at Columbine. And today's topic,
Rachel's Challenge, Bullying and School Violence Prevention Program 25 years later. This is going to be a good one.
Well, Zuzu, I never dreamed I'd be talking to you.
Well, I think you helped ring some of those bells, by golly. You're sprouting your wings.
Get ready for miracles. Get ready for Zuzu. All Grown Up.
It's been 25 years since the first major school shooting in modern history. On that fateful day, today's guest, Darrell Scott, lost his daughter, Rachel Joy Scott, who was the first victim of the tragedy. His son survived by playing dead between two other victims. In the 2.5 decades since then, Darrell Scott has continued his mission faithfully to pick up his daughter's torch and spread her life to new generations with a message on the importance of kindness and how it can start a chain reaction. Discover the amazing story of faith against all odds and a father-daughter relationship that survives even death. It's a powerful and important message, and it's coming up next on Zuzu, All Grown Up.
When you read the entries in her diary, there's no doubt she was prophetic. I mean, it's as clear as a bell. And so many of the things she wrote that still just boggle my mind.
Joining us today, we have the honor of welcoming Darrell Scott of Rachel's Challenge to the show. Karolyn and Dr. Chris, this is a very important interview that we are able to share today. Over to you.
Well, today we have a very interesting guest for sure. Our topic is Rachel's Challenge, Bullying and School Violence Prevention Program 25 years later. Darrell Scott is the father to Rachel Scott. She was the first person killed at Columbine High School. Darrell, we're honored to have you with us as a guest today on our podcast, sharing your emotional story as a parent of 2 children attending Columbine High School 25 years ago. Rachel, your daughter, the first to be killed, and your son, Craig, who had 2 of his friends die on either side of him. Little did you know how your life changed that day, and we would appreciate your sharing what happened on April the 20th, 1999.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you today. 25 years ago, my life did change as the Columbine tragedy unfolded. I was at a shopping center, and I got a phone call from my wife saying that there had been a school shooting at Columbine. And in my mind, I was thinking that possibly a young man was angry at another young man, had taken a gun and shot at someone. But I wasn't prepared for, nor was the world prepared for what was about to happen, because there had never been a mass school shooting like Columbine. So I rushed out from the store to my car. I started toward the school and I turned on the radio, and I was absolutely stunned because the announcer said that up to 30 students had been shot, that many of them had been killed. And immediately, of course, I'm thinking about my 2 children, and my brother also had 2 children there. I had a niece and nephew there. And I was thinking of what were the odds that one of the 4 that were part of our family could be a part of that tragedy, because there were 1,600 students. So I did the math thinking, possibly we're okay, but my heart was pounding. When I got to the elementary school where they were telling us to go and wait for buses to bring the students in, my brother was one of the first people that I saw. And he said, we've heard from his 2 children, we've heard from my son Craig, but we haven't heard from Rachel. And that was the most agonizing 5 hours at that elementary school, waiting for buses to come. I remember going outside, balancing on a fence, trying to peer into bus windows, hoping to get a glimpse of my daughter. And at one point, I thought I saw her, but it was another girl. And about 3 hours later, the last buses had come, and our only hope was that she had been shot and wounded and was somewhere in a hospital. It's a terrible thing when your only hope is that your child has been wounded. So we called every hospital frantically, no Rachel Scott. And by 5 or 6 o'clock that night, we realized that she was one of the victims. We didn't get official word until noon the next day. It was just a horrible 24 hours. And my heart really goes out to parents who never know what happens to their children. There's nothing worse than not knowing. And people talk about closure. It's been 25 years. You never get closure from losing a child. You're always going to remember them. You're always going to have a certain amount of grief. But throughout the years, her story began to be amplified and told. We've reached 31 million students and parents in live settings over the last 25 years. I've personally spoken to over 5 million people in live settings. But we have a great team of people that share Rachel's story in assemblies, and then we do trainings, and we create activities, and we create Friends of Rachel clubs in schools. We have over 10,000 of those. We now have 8 employees in Mexico, and in the Guadalajara area, we're reaching about 20,000 to 30,000 young people a year. So her life and legacy counted and continues to count.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
As a parent and a family member or a friend of someone whose life changed as a result of an act of violence, what words of encouragement can you offer from your experiences?
Well, my experience was a little unique in that the whole world was watching that tragedy, and we could not leave the first 2 years when I first began to go out and speak. I couldn't walk out my door without CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. For 2 years, they were everywhere I went. So my experience was a lot different than most parents. But what I do encourage parents to do, regardless of how their child died, whether it's from suicide or a school shooting or from a disease or a car accident is to focus not on the death, not on the cause of death, but to focus on the good memories, the life that they shared with that child, because that's really where the healing takes place. The more you focus on the negative, the worse the wound gets. I've spoken to a lot of conventions specifically where nothing but victims' families were there. And that's always been my encouragement. Focus on the good things, the memories, and that's what we've done with Rachel's Challenge.
A month after it happened, you were asked to speak before the Congressional Subcommittee on School Violence. How did you handle that just a month after she was gone?
You know, something really unique happened. To me, looking back on it, was pretty amazing. I write a lot of poetry, and I had written a poem sitting at my breakfast table, and the poem goes like this. Your laws ignore our deepest needs. Your words are empty air. You've stripped away our heritage. You've outlawed simple prayer. Now gunshots fill our classrooms and precious children die. You look for answers everywhere and ask the question why. You regulate restrictive laws through legislative creed, and yet you fail to understand that God is what we need. And when I finished writing that poem, I told my wife and my daughter Bethany, I said, you know, I could almost hear someone like Charlton Heston reading this poem to Congress, and I had no idea that a week later I would be reading that poem before Congress. But meanwhile, about 2 days later, I got a phone call, and I had an answering machine at that time. Young people don't know what those are. They're little black boxes that record messages from people that call you. And the voice, instantly I recognized the voice. It was Moses. And he said, Mr. Scott, this is Charlton Heston. I've been watching the interviews that you've been doing, and I just want to thank you for not blaming me and the NRA for killing your daughter, because they were getting a lot of heat at that time for that. And I said, Mr. Heston, you know, I let him talk. And just before he hung up, I grabbed the phone because I wanted to record as much of Moses as I could. Still have that recording. We talked for quite a while. I said, well, the NRA didn't kill my daughter. 2 boys that had mental health problems did. A gun didn't wake up and decide to go and shoot my daughter. It was done by 2 boys. And I have believed from that day until this that you can pass all the gun laws you want to, but the issue has to do with the hearts of our young people. And we are the only organization I know of that has seen 9 school shootings actually prevented. One of them took place just 2 months ago, and I can't go into detail because it's still under investigation. But some of those have been on national news, and we're the only organization I know of that actually prevents over 150 suicides every year. And we know that because we hear directly from those students. To me, the remedy, I'm for anything that would prevent violence. But the problem is we keep passing laws. The criminals keep breaking the laws. We've got to reach the hearts of our young people. My wife and I went to Washington, D.C., and I gave that little speech, and I had no idea that it was going to go ballistic on the internet. And it became the #1 most watched or listened to video. I began to get swamped with phone calls from large organizations asking me to come and speak. So I thought, honestly, I would just take a leave of absence from my job for maybe 2 or 3 months and honor Rachel's life. Mm-hmm. I had no idea that for the next 25 years I'd be involved in sharing her story on an ongoing basis. So that's what's happened.
You have a remarkable story. From a tragedy, it seems as though you've been able to turn this around into, addressing some of the issues that are underlying much of what brings us here today. And that's the hearts of young people, the hearts of people, that have mental health issues. It's a very serious problem that's underserved. Well, I was wondering what type of support services at that time, including mental health, were offered to you and others that were associated with the shooting at Columbine High School.
There was counseling offered, free counseling offered to all the victims' families, but we have such a strong family bond with our children and with our, with kinfolks here in the Denver area that we declined any outside help. Our faith was a big part of our life. So I didn't feel like I needed a stranger helping me at that point, even though I do believe in counseling and I do believe in help from psychologists, psychiatrists when it's needed. But I never struggled the way many people struggle because I felt from the beginning that Rachel's life was meant to be what it was. And especially as we began to read her diaries and we began to talk to some of her friends. We did put my son through counseling because my son was in the library that day where most of the shooting took place. And his two friends were killed beside him in the library, which was the killing zone. And he lost his sister, and he struggled for years with mental health. And we took him through counseling and did everything that we could to help him. He's doing great today. He's actually in the movie industry. He works with Trilith in Atlanta and is close friends with Dan Cathy's son. Dan Cathy owns Chick-fil-A and also owns Trilith, which has now become the second Hollywood. And so Craig has been involved in a number of movies. He worked with the Farrelly brothers on Dumb and Dumber, Three Stooges, a number of movies. And he's done some producing and directing and acting himself. So he's in a good place. And our whole family is. We honor Rachel's life by sharing about acts of kindness that she did in her school.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about her diary that you found in her backpack? Can you share what entries she had, and including her very last entry?
Now, Rachel was very much a writer. She loved writing, and she was inspired by Anne Frank to keep diaries, and she left us with 6 diaries. Later, after Rachel died, Sandy and I got to meet Geese, the lady who actually hid Anne Frank and the Frank family in the attic, had produced Anne Frank's movie. A gentleman by the name of Clore Salk, who was 82 years old when we met him, became a speaker for Rachel's Challenge. He was Anne Frank's dad's best friend. And he was the first CEO of the Anne Frank House, Amsterdam. And he took care of Meep, who was 100 years old, and he would drive 100 miles every weekend to take care of her. So Sandy and I got to go and meet with Meep and with Cor. And as we met that day, Meep showed me the desk right behind where I was sitting at the table. She said, "That's the desk where Anne began to write her diary." That was Otto Frank's desk that he gave me. And there was a scarf hanging on the chair beside me. And she said that was the scarf Anne was wearing the day that they captured her. It fell off. She lived in a little modest 3-room condo. I told my wife afterwards, she could have sold that desk for millions of dollars, or that scarf. But she was such an honorable lady. And it was such an honor to make that connection. Over to the desk and just ran my hand across the wood where Anne Frank had started her diary and reflected on the fact that Anne never dreamed that she was going to inspire a little girl, my daughter, years later to keep 6 diaries that the world would be aware of. But in Rachel's diaries, she wrote a lot about her feelings, her premonitions. When she was 13 years old, on the back of her dresser, she drew an outline of her hands. And in the middle of her hand, on the back of her dresser, she wrote, "These hands belong to Rachel Joy Scott and will someday touch millions of people's hearts." So from the time she was 13 years old, she began to write about premonitions she had that her life was going to have an impact on the world. And she also had a strong premonitions that she was going to die at a young age. In fact, one of her last poems that she wrote, she said, "I'm dying. Quickly my soul leaves. Slowly my body withers. It isn't suicide. I consider it homicide. The world you have created has led to my death." I still get chills when I read that poem because it's exactly what happened. She died as a homicide victim. And one of the last poems she wrote also, she wrote, and it was kind of a prayer. She said, "Lord, this will be my last year." She wrote that 11 months before she died. "This will be my last year. I have gotten what I can. Thank you." And then her final poem was in the form of a prayer as well. And it said, "Who will you give to walk with me through these halls of a tragedy?" So there was just many, many her writings that reflected. Now, there's the positive side also. She wrote that her life was going to impact millions of lives in a positive way. And she told her friends, she told one of her friends, I'm not going to live to be old enough to have children or get married or go to college like the rest of you, but my life is going to count. So as we begin to share those stories in school assemblies, we have very powerful video footage that we use. And then we tell stories. We tell stories of her kindness. For example, she reached out to a young man by the name of Adam. Adam had mental disorders. He was born with disabilities, both mentally and physically. And two boys had knocked his books out of his hands and had pushed him up against lockers and were making fun of him. And my daughter was down the hall. She saw what was happening, and she ran down the hall, got between Adam and those two boys, doubled up her fists. She said, if you touch him again, you're going to have to fight me. And I'm sure they were scared out of their mind, half their size, threatening them. She's got to be Chuck Norris's daughter or something. But anyway, they backed off, and she and Adam became friends. She only had 2 months to live at that point. And Adam told us, we met him a couple of months after the tragedy, and he was crying when he told us the story. And he said, what Rachel died not knowing was that she saved my life from suicide. I was planning to take my life. I knew how, when, and where. And when she stood up for me that day, for the first time, I felt like somebody cared. And she got her friends to become my friends.
We'll join Karolyn and Chris in just a moment with more of Zuzu All Grown Up.
First, an important message.
Pass it on.
Today my bank made a big mistake, but I forgave them. My server spilled water on me, but I forgave him. My toddler drew lipstick on the wall. Was I ever mad? It got me thinking, I can forgive my bank and my server, but I'm upset with my own kid? I mean, what's most important here? So, tonight, the two of us are doing lipstick art. On paper. Forgiveness is in you.
Pass it on.
From passiton.com.
Start your morning right with premium coffee roasts available at ZuzuNetwork.com and drink them in your Zuzu All Grown Up coffee mug. Also perfect for tea and hot chocolate.
Stay inspired throughout the day with the same gratitude journal used by Karolyn and Chris, and check out t-shirts, hats, books, Christmas keepsakes, and more at ZuzuNetwork.com/shop.
Are you wondering whether to sell or donate the car you no longer need or want? Consider that. Donating it to a legitimate, legally recognized nonprofit organization, not only will you receive a tax deduction, but you'll be contributing to a worthy cause. Finding a worthy nonprofit organization can be time-consuming and even a bit stressful. I'm here to present to you one of the most amazing, legitimate 501c3 nonprofit organizations in the world. The United Breast Cancer Foundation. The UBCF provides screenings, treatments, aftercare services, educational materials, as well as patient and family assistance. We ask that you help in that mission by donating your unwanted or unused vehicle to the UBCF. Simply call 888-842-5505. The process is fast and easy. Call 888-842-5505. 888-842-5505. Help us in our mission and get a tax deduction. Call 888-842-5505. Thank you for your support.
Sometimes life is wonderful, and sometimes it's not. Cherish the good, but always be prepared for life's challenges. At Private Healthcare, we provide the peace of mind you deserve. With Private Healthcare, you'll get the coverage you want and healthcare you need. If your employer doesn't supply healthcare coverage and you don't qualify for Medicare or Medicaid, you need to give us a call right now. Private Healthcare is private health insurance for ages 65 and under with medical, dental, vision, and even prescription coverage. When life comes at you unexpectedly, you need to be ready, and health insurance is your financial safety net. If you're looking for health coverage at the best price and your annual household income is $35,000 or more, give us a call at 800-683-4655. That's 800-863-4655. 800-683-4655.
Join Zuzu's network today at ZuzuNetwork.com/join.
Karolyn is creating an international network of aspiring angels, everyday people who believe that they can help make the world a better place by making life better for even just one other person.
Let us know you want to earn your wings at zuzunetwork.com/join, and Karolyn and Chris will send you inspirational material to support you in your journey.
We're back with more Zuzu All Grown Up.
So we have numerous stories like that we share as we go into the schools. We also partner with Chuck Norris and his wife, Gina. We do all their character programming for their program, which is called Kickstart for Kids. They have a program mainly in Texas. Chuck and Gina have become very dear friends of ours. They've been with us in many of our events together. And we do the baseball camps for Cal Ripken Jr. Cal had me come and speak to his board of directors. So we reach kids in baseball camps and karate camps and, for every kind of situation you can imagine.
Can you share how special your daughter was and her compassion for these 3 different people that she wrote about in her diary?
Yes, Rachel was my middle child. I had 5 children and 3 stepchildren. And Rachel was the kind of child that would bring home a stray dog or cat. She just had a kind heart from the day she was born. We have video of her with her brothers and sisters, and she's always looking out for the needs of other people. She was just so helpful around the house and everything she did. And that kindness seemed to grow with age and with time. But she was very tenderhearted, but she was also feisty and liked to play jokes on people, pranks on people. She could get into an argument with you if she wanted to. So it wasn't like she was a pushover. And she was a very beautiful girl. People just loved her. And so at school, she reached out to 3 specific groups, and she actually wrote about it. She said, I want to reach out to those that are new at school because they don't have friends yet. I want to reach out to those that are picked on or put down by others. And she said, I want to reach out to those that are disabled. And she did that. We have story after story. One story, we have a young girl by the name of Amber, who was her first day at Columbine. She had moved from Atlanta, Georgia, a month earlier, her and her dad and brothers, because her mom had died in a car wreck there. And so they moved to Columbine. And her first day at school, she walked in the cafeteria, and there were some girls sitting there, and there was an empty chair. And she walked over and asked if she could join them for lunch. And they all made snide remarks about the new girl, and they got up and left. And the whole cafeteria saw that. And Rachel was sitting 2 tables away with some of her friends, and she was really upset with the way Amber got treated. So she took her tray, got up and left her friends, walked over and asked Amber if she could join her for lunch. And Amber said instantly, my worst day at school became one of my best days at school because one person went out of her way to show compassion.
What you're telling me is that her background and her foundation came from you and your wife. You gave her the skills and the foundation she needed to be who she was. I congratulate you.
Well, thank you. And it was more than just the 2 of us. It was her extended family as well. We've always been thankful for that.
When your daughter spoke of the chain reaction, what did she exactly have in mind?
She wrote an essay a month before she died called My Ethics, My Codes of Life. That essay has become sort of a foundational piece that we use in trainings in schools, because what we do is we go in and do a 1-hour assembly for the whole school. We have 50 presenters that are trained here in the United States and 8 in Mexico, and they travel all over the world, primarily in the United States, and they'll do an assembly that's very motivational, inspirational, and then we follow that up with a 90-minute training. The foundation for that training is Rachel's Codes of Life. And in her Codes of Life, she said, I have this theory that if one person, and we emphasize one person, not a crowd, not a couple, just one person. She said, if one person will go out of their way, that means you got to make an effort to do it. If one person will go out of their way to show compassion, and we talk about the difference between feeling compassion and showing compassion. It's not enough for one person to go out of their way to feel compassion. They must show it, which means you got to do something. Then she said, it will start a chain reaction of the same. People will never know how far a little kindness can go. So as we train young people, we give them projects to do in the schools, and we create what's called a Friends of Rachel Club. And those, we have over 10,000 of those all over the country. And those clubs do amazing things. For example, when we leave a school, the club will start what they call Rachel's Pantry. They'll take a vacant classroom in the school and begin to fill it up with food. They'll go to the local food banks, go to the local grocery stores, and they'll bring in cereal and milk and all kinds of food so that students who are poor, who can't afford a good lunch or dinner or breakfast, can come in before school and have breakfast. Or they can stay after school and have dinner. And so we have Rachel's Pantries. Then we have Rachel's Closets. Rachel's Closets are another classroom that's full of donated clothing from students who donate clothing or from businesses that donate clothing. So there's everything from underwear, and these are brand new, to shoes, to socks, to dresses, to pants. It's a room full of clothing. Then we have Rachel's Salons, where local hairdressers volunteer to come in once a month and cut anybody's hair that needs a haircut or do anything like that. So it's, I could go on and on and on, but these are projects that the schools adopt. They multiply these acts of kindness every day. Hundreds of thousands of acts of kindness are being done because of Rachel's simple acts of kindness.
So how do you feel about the amount of mass shootings which have intensified since Columbine, quarter of a century ago? Do you feel like progress is being made in any way?
I don't, because when Columbine happened, the internet was just a baby. And now there's social media. Bullying, for example, when we were all young, only took place on the schoolyard. You could go home and get away from it. Now kids are not, they're bullied 24 hours a day. And we have a program that combats that, which I can get into a little bit later. But I think because of the internet and because of Twitter and TikTok and all these social media outlets, there's so much information available and there's so much bullying, much more bullying now than there was when we were kids, because you could confront your bully. And now the kids are bullied online, and the person doing the bullying doesn't even have to show their identity. So I think the answer is what we're doing, and we're not the only ones doing this, and we're not the only ones that should be doing this, but we need to focus on giving more positive messages through the media, doing what we can to reach the hearts of young people and change their minds about the violence that they're considering.
So Rachel's Challenge puts a lot of focus on teaching kindness and preventing bullying. Do you have any sense of, I don't even want to say empathy or compassion, but perhaps give some level of dispensation of guilt to the perpetrators because of their age and emotional damage? What I'm trying to figure out is part of the message says if bullying can be stopped, so can mass shootings and so on. Does that mean that the perpetrators are in some way victims of their own environment?
Yes, they are. There is a certain amount of blame that they have. Not the victims. Are you talking about the shooters?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
The shooters, most of the time, are suicidal. So this starts off as a school shooting. It almost always starts off with suicidal thinking. And then there's a handful of the mass number of young people who consider suicide that take it to the next level and want to take out as many people as they can with them. Usually these are young people that are very angry. They've been bullied themselves. They have mental health issues like the Sandy Hook shooter. It's so unfortunate that they didn't get help. So I have never viewed them as monsters. I viewed them as young people who were born as beautiful little babies who got influenced somehow and some way and directed into a life of violence or thinking in that direction. And in the case of Eric and Dylan, the ones who killed my daughter, we know their story. It's very clear. They got involved in video games and were violent. They felt left out of the inner circle at Columbine. Combination of a number of things that brought the two of them together. and eventually led to the planning for what happened at Columbine. I have friends who've lost children in school shootings. Scarlett Lewis, a dear friend of ours, lost her son at Sandy Hook. He's the only student that's ever been given military burial. He was 6 years old. He screamed for all the kids to run when the shooter came in the room. And then instead of running, he ran back to his teacher, threw out his arms to try to protect her. And he was shot and killed. And the military gave him a military warrior's funeral because they viewed him as a true warrior. Scarlett, his mother, was able to forgive the shooter because she understood. She took the time to investigate why he did what he did. She saw that he was terribly mentally ill. She has a program to try to help with mental illness as well.
You repeated the quote that what is essential is invisible to the eye, and shared encounters that involve a certain level of supernatural influence. What is invisible to the eye that we need to see? And how important is it for each of us to look for the essential invisible in our own lives?
That's a really good question. I can go for 2 hours on that answer. We are made up of 3 parts: body, soul, which is our mind, will, and emotions, and human spirit, which is deeper than the soul. And the human spirit is where intuition, communion with God and each other, awareness, consciousness, awareness dwells. And there's a big difference between the soul and the spirit. The Greeks understood that. The soul is the word psyche, from which we get the word psychology and psychiatrist. And the word spirit is the word pneuma, from which we get the word breath, pneumatic, pneumonia. Most humans today don't know the difference between those two. And there's a huge battle that goes on daily in all of our lives, and it's all right here. We have, according to psychologists, 40 to 70,000 thoughts every single day. 80% of those are negative, and 90% of those are repetitive. Now, that's arguable because different studies have been done, but roughly that's the equation that I've come up with from the studies I've done. So we have these negative thoughts, and they're repetitive, and until we take the time to become aware that we're thinking these thoughts, the first step to freedom is awareness. If I can become aware that I'm thinking all these thoughts, at least I can stop thinking some of them. And I can become a little more in control of my mind instead of letting my mind be in control of me. So when I go to get into an argument with someone, the first thing I do is not try to defend my thinking, but to stop and say, why am I doing this? What am I feeling? And it's amazing when you address yourself instead of the other person, the anger begins to dissipate. You get centered. You get more calm. So these are things that we help teach young people as well, to be conscious of their breathing, count to 10, simple exercises that can be done. But the invisible realm is, in my opinion, much more real than the visible realm. To me, the visible realm is just the expression of the invisible realm. So, for example, the things that matter the most in our life are not visible. Love is not visible. It can be expressed visibly. Hatred is not visible. It's expressed visibly. Jealousy, envy, strife, kindness, compassion, all of these things that can be expressed, but they're invisible traits that are just as real as the nose on my face. And when we learn to live in both worlds, because we live in 2 worlds, a visible world and an invisible world. And Lao Tzu, who was the very wise Chinese philosopher who wrote the Tao Te Ching, the very first verse of the Tao Te Ching says, ever focused on the visible, one will never know the mystery of life. Ever focused on the mystery, one will know the mystery of life and enjoy the manifestation. So my personal life is focused on the mystery, and I enjoy the manifestation. People who focus on the manifestation are doomed to have ups and downs, moods, depression, etc., etc.
There you found a drawing in Rachel's notebook of a Columbine flower.
Yeah.
Some people don't know that that's a flower, but this flower has some very unique features. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's one of the stories that we share in schools toward the end of our presentation. I got a phone call from a total stranger, a man by the name of Frank, who lived in Youngstown, Ohio, about 6 weeks after Rachel's funeral. And he said, "Mr. Scott, you don't know me. We've never met. And what I'm about to tell you is going to sound strange." And he said, "You may think I'm crazy and you may hang up on me." And he said, "If you do, I won't be offended." But he said, "I've had something happen concerning your daughter that I need to tell you." And of course, he had my attention. And he said, "I've had a reoccurring dream for the last 2 weeks. And in that dream, every single night, I see your daughter's eyes, and there's a trickle of tears falling from her eyes, and the tears are watering something that's growing out of the ground. It's bringing life out of the ground from her tears." And he said, I just need to know if that means anything to you." And I said, "No, Frank, it doesn't. I'm sorry." He said, "Well, would you take my phone number? If it means anything to any of your family members, please give me a call." I thought I would never talk to Frank again, but I wrote his phone number down, thought that would be the end of it. But a week later, I got a phone call from the sheriff's department, and they said, "We have Rachel's backpack ready for you to pick up." There were 4 bullet holes through her backpack, and they had kept it as evidence. So I rushed over to get it, and I rushed out to my car. I can't even describe what I was feeling that day. My emotions were running high. We knew that her last 2 diaries were probably in her backpack. And so I opened her backpack and pulled out her final diary. And like any parent, I wanted to see the last thing she had written before she died. So I opened up the last page of her diary, and I was just stunned because I was looking at a picture of her eyes, a trickle of tears falling from her eyes. The tears fall on a rose, and when they hit the rose is America's national flower. They turn dark. They turn from teardrops to either blood drops or seeds. And the rose is growing out of a columbine plant. The Colorado state flower is the columbine. The national flower is the rose. Columbine, of course, is the name of the school. So you've got life coming from her tears out of the ground, both locally and nationally. I was just stunned. So when I got home, I called Frank, asked if he had a fax machine.
We'll join Karolyn and Chris in just a moment with more of Zuzu All Grown Up.
First, an important message.
Join Zuzu's network today at zuzunetwork.com/join.
Karolyn is creating an international network of aspiring angels, everyday people who believe that they can help make the world a better place by making life better for even just one other person.
Let us know you want to earn your wings at zuzunetwork.com/join, and Karolyn and Chris will send you inspirational material to support you in your journey.
This is an important announcement for anyone who wants health insurance, even if you missed the deadline. That's right. Don't worry if you missed the deadline for open enrollment. Right now, you can get the health insurance you and your family need from top insurance providers, even if you have pre-existing conditions or no insurance at all. The Plus Benefits Health Insurance toll-free number has been extended to help anyone who wants health insurance coverage now, or anyone who just needs a better plan or a lower price. Did you miss the penalty deadline, have a baby, get married, or get dropped from your plan? Don't worry, plans are available now, and in just minutes, we will help you find the right plan that's best for you and your budget. Call Plus Benefits Health Insurance now at 800-332-1993. The call is 100% free and the help is real. You can finally get health insurance that's right for you. But hurry and get covered before it's too late. Call 800-332-1993 now to find the best plan at the lowest price. Call 800-332-1993. That's 800-332-1993. 800-332-1993.
The impact of a meal goes well beyond feeding our bodies, because feeling full can sound like this.
How did the interview go? I did it! I got the job! I can't believe it!
And like this.
Mom, I got first place at the science fair with my volcano project.
That's amazing, sweetie. Congratulations.
Because when people are fed, futures are nourished, and everyone deserves to live a full life. Join the movement to end hunger at feedingamerica.org/act now. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
1 out of 8 women in the United States will be diagnosed with breast cancer in her lifetime. And the chances are you know at least one person who's been personally affected. But right now, you can help. It's simple. Donate your unwanted vehicle, RV, or trailer to the United Breast Cancer Foundation. It's the easiest way to contribute to one of the nation's leading charitable organizations. The process is fast, easy, and free. Not only will you be helping, but you'll also receive a tax deduction. The United Breast Cancer Foundation offers an array of programs and services that help and support families and individuals dealing with breast cancer. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. Simply give us a call to get started, and we'll schedule a pickup date that is convenient for you. If you have any questions you would like answered before initiating the donation process, please feel free to call us toll-free at 800-324-6218. That's 800-324-6218. 800-324-6218.
A careless driver can change your life in an instant. Do you know what to do or who to call? If you've been injured in a motor vehicle accident and don't have an attorney, call Auto Accident Help Desk for a free consultation. We can answer all of your questions and estimate the potential value of your case. Call Auto Accident Help Desk and connect with an expert personal injury attorney.
Call 800-297-9766. 800-297-9766.
Don't worry how to handle your medical bills, lost wages, and pain. We will get you the money you deserve.
They got me way more than the insurance company offered.
The consultation is free, and you don't pay any legal fees unless we win or settle your case. Make the smart call if you've been injured in an auto accident. Call Auto Accident Help Desk for a free legal consultation.
Call 800-297-9766. 800-297-9766. 800-297-9766.
Auto Accident Help Desk.
Zuzu's book club features recommendations from Zuzu herself on books she loves and thinks you will love also. All of the books that the club reads, fiction and nonfiction, are inspirational and uplifting. Folks, this is a life-enhancing club to be part of. You can sign up for free at zuzunetwork.com/book club. That's zuzunetwork.com/book club. This episode's featured book for the Zuzu Book Club is Rachel Smiles, The Spiritual Legacy of Rachel Scott, by her father and today's guest, Darrell Scott. This inspiring book tells the encouraging stories of those who are still passing on Rachel's spiritual legacy and creating a chain reaction of kindness. Her father, Darrell Scott, shares his own reflections and never before published writings and drawings from Rachel's journal. They're also included. That's Rachel Smiles, The Spiritual Legacy of Rachel Scott, our book club recommendation for today's episode.
Imagine having all the money you need for retirement, all the income, every month, guaranteed. That's Secure Future Investor. Secure Future utilizes an indexed annuity tied to growth in the U.S. stock market, but without any risk of loss ever. That's right. No matter what happens in the market, your investment can never decline. Down years, you're insured against any losses. Boom years, your retirement account grows exponentially to increase your worth. Whether the market is up or down, Secure Future Investor can set you up with guaranteed money for life income. It's the difference between thinking you have enough money to retire and knowing you're getting that retirement check every single month for the rest of your life, no matter how long you live. Over 40 years old? Call now. 888-288-7088. 888-288-7088. Sponsored by GP Agency, Inc., Raleigh, North Carolina. Licensed in all states. Performance may vary. Consult with your financial professional before making an investment decision.
This is Zuzu. All grown up.
I faxed over the picture. He called me back weeping. He said, "This is exactly what I saw in my dream." I spoke to about 10,000 people at the Old Country Store in Jackson, Tennessee, which was the prototype for all the Cracker Barrels around the country. And the owners were invited everyone within 100 miles to come. And over 10,000 people showed up. And they invited churches to bring folding chairs so that people have a place to sit. It was an outdoor event. And they had huge speakers all the way down the line. And at that time, I didn't have any video or any pictures to show. I just was speaking. This was only a few months after Frank Amedia encounter, my encounter with Frank. And so for the first time in public, I told the story of Rachel's tears. A little girl sitting over to my left just started sobbing. And when I finished speaking, she was the first one to run up to me. And she had a Bible in her hands, and it was open to the book of Jeremiah. And she said, Mr. Scott, I didn't know your daughter's name. I didn't know your name. I just knew that a Columbine parent was coming to talk about his daughter. But she said, I felt so impressed to read this passage from the Old Testament and to have whoever was coming read it with me. And now I know why. And she handed me her Bible, and it was open to Jeremiah, a passage that says, a loud voice was heard in Ramah, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted, for her children are no more. Thus says the Lord, stop your weeping, dry your tears, for your work will be rewarded. And I shall return the children from their land of bondage and bring them back to the land of freedom. And when I read those words, not religiously, when I read them, just think of it as Buddha or, any other old prophet, they went right into my spirit. And I knew my purpose from that day forward. I knew that Rachel's story was going to be used to bring millions of young people out of the land of bondage back into the land of freedom. And we've seen that happen over and over and over again.
Do you believe in premonitions that she somehow knew that one day her story would touch millions of people's hearts?
Yes, I do.
And can you share what you found in her room on Christmas Day?
What happened was my daughter helping move a dresser from one room to another. And this was 2 years after Rachel died on Christmas Day. When they moved the dresser, my daughter Dana saw this drawing of Rachel's hands and the writing, these hands belong to Rachel. And Dana remembered because she was with Rachel the day that Rachel drew that, because Dana and Rachel both had drawn some things on the back of the dresser. And so Dana called me. She said, Dad, you're not going to believe what we just found. And she told me the story. And I told my wife, I said, what better Christmas present could we ever receive than what we just received?
Sure. Oh, my goodness. I know. As difficult a decision as it must have been, how did you and your family decide to create Rachel's Challenge? And how has it evolved in the last 25 years?
Well, we honestly never sat down and planned to come up with a school program. That was never a plan. It just evolved. What happened was, after I spoke before Congress, I started getting swamped with phone calls, and I was doing events that were just huge. Up to the largest event I ever did was 400,000 people. And that was the third largest gathering in American history at the Washington Mall, outdoor mall. But I got phone calls from Australia. They had me to come and speak in the Olympic Center. It was packed out with people there. I went to New Zealand. Around 80,000 people showed up. All these places around the world. And here in America, football stadiums, soccer stadiums, a small crowd would be 20,000 people. So we didn't plan on this. It was just something that was kind of thrust on us after my speech before Congress. But we began to realize the impact of her story on lives. We had friends in El Paso, Texas, that called and said, would you come and do assemblies for every school in El Paso? I got about 15 young people from Columbine, one young girl that still had a bullet in her from the shooting, my children, and several that were there the day of the shooting. And we spent one day training them in telling Rachel's story. And we sent them into 40 schools that week. And at the end of the week, we did a big event at the Civic Center. And the impact from that 40 schools was just overwhelming. We had gang members take off their colors and quit their gangs. We had kids that were going to commit suicide that changed their mind. I mean, the stories we heard just blew our minds. And that's when we decided we need to do something in schools. And so we began to just do assemblies. And we didn't know that anybody could do it except our own family. So it was me, my son Craig, my daughter Bethany, my daughter Dana, and later my son Mike. All of us did assemblies And we would see these powerful impacts on the lives of these kids, but there was something missing, and that was the follow-up. We knew we were having an emotional impact, but what was happening 3 months later? That was my big question. Was the emotion dying down? And so I knew that we were going to have to multiply ourselves. So I trained a young man to speak in my stead, and we began to train others. Now we have 50 trained speakers here in America and 8 in Mexico, and we'll continue to add as we grow. And they tell the story, and the impact is just as great as if I was there. I haven't done schools in a long time, but my focus has been on developing follow-up. So the first thing we did was we followed up with these trainings called Friends of Rachel Clubs. And those clubs then would create the Rachel's Pantries, the Rachel's Salons, the Rachel's Closets, and many other things. So we have just literally hundreds and hundreds of acts of kindness that are programmed, almost like they're ritual programmed acts of kindness that we train young people to do. Like, for example, we have a program called the New Student Program. And the whole Friends of Rachel Club welcomes a new student when they first come to school. And 5 or 6 of them are appointed to sit with them for lunch the first day. So we have tons of programs like that. And we continue to develop those to give young people some outlet as to what you can do to make a difference in your school and in your community. I've spoken before Congress and Senate several times. Sandy and I met with President Bush. We met with President Clinton several times, and I met with President Trump 3 times, and all of them have been helpful. We're a non-political, non-religious organization, so we work with people on both sides of the aisle.
And today, Rachel's challenge is to inspire and equip others to create a permanent positive cultural change. Can you share what Rachel's theory was and how that, along with your message of compassion, is working in settings like schools, businesses, and others?
We have had success in businesses as well, but we felt like our focus needed to be on young people. We probably could have made a lot more money in the business side because we were in demand. I spoke before all the presidents of Bank of America, and they said it was the most powerful event they ever had. Not because of me, but because of Rachel's story. I spoke to BNSF Railroad employees, Motorola, a lot of the big companies, and we were encouraged to develop a corporate program. But again, we felt like the biggest change would come if we focused on young people. And so Rachel's Codes of Life that she wrote like I said earlier, was the foundation for the trainings that we do. And then from those seeds that she planted on acts of kindness, we've amplified that. I've been the primary developer of content, but now we have a whole team of people. I'm sort of fading out. We have a great CEO, a young lady who's been in business and is doing great. So I go play golf. I sit at home. I do a little writing, and I do a few of these podcasts, and occasionally do a big conference.
How many presentations have you and your staff or volunteers done over the years?
We know that we've reached over 31 million live audience people. We've lost track of the number of events. We've done up to 2,000 events a year, and usually the events average about 1,000 people.
Why is it important for your executive staff to also be presenters for Rachel's Challenge?
Well, almost all of our employees have been speakers at one time because they really get to know what it feels like to be out there among the young people. There's nothing like hands-on experience. We do have a couple of employees like in accounting, HR, that haven't been speakers, but that's not a job that requires them to really understand, although all of them are totally sold on the program and all of them have heard the story many times. But we found that people that have done speaking make our best employees because their heart is totally in it. Once they speak for us, they feel like they're a part of the family. We call it the Rachel's Challenge family. We have a hard time letting people go because they don't want to ever go. We have a great team.
Well, it looks like that you have reduced the level of harassment and bullying by the talks and the things that you are providing for the schools. So it's having positive influence on the situation, very definitely. Okay.
And one of the things we do, we never focus on the negative. We never use the word bullying. We never focus on bad actions. We totally focus on acts of kindness and compassion. And so we are pro things, not against things. So we are pro kindness, not against bullying. And we create programs like, for example, a social media bullying program is we train our Friends of Rachel Club so that when a kid is being bullied at school, everybody knows it. Everybody's on social media. So they know when that one is being picked on or put down by others. We encourage the Friends of Rachel Club to ignore the bully and focus on the person being bullied and start sending them all kinds of compliments. Hey, Joe, I love your smile. Man, that jacket you wore the other day, I wish I had one like that. You know, you got the best shoes in the school. You know, and so they just get bombarded words of kindness that overshadow the bully's words. And we found that the bully shuts up because the bullies are looking for attention. And when you've got 100 kids overwhelming that one kid with words of kindness on social media, the bully is like, what the hell? And so they back off. And it works. We see it work every time.
How you would say that Rachel's challenge to start a chain reaction of kindness is happening?
Yeah. By the way, the chain reaction thing, we started years ago encouraging young people and adults to record acts of kindness, because when you see an act of kindness, your endorphin level goes up. Your pleasant drug goes up. Best drug you can have is endorphins. So when you see an act of kindness, your endorphins increase. When you do an act of kindness, your endorphins increase. When you receive an act of kindness, your endorphins increase. So what we begin to tell young people and adults is every time you see an act of kindness, do an act of kindness, or receive an act of kindness, write it down on a little strip of paper, a little colored piece of paper. And schools now provide those pieces of paper. And then turn it into chain links. And those chain links grow throughout the school year. And at the end of the year, we have what's called Rachel's Rallies. We have them all over the country, sometimes entire cities. Like, for example, in 2011, the entire city of Atlanta got involved. And the Georgia Dome was filled with parents and students. And they brought in chain links by the hundreds of thousands. And they used cranes to raise them up to the ceiling. And we had movie stars that came online to greet the kids. And we had celebrities that were there to greet the kids and compliment them on their acts of kindness. The largest chain that's ever been created, I think broke a world record, was in a town in a little town in Texas. Oh, I can't remember the name right now. And the chain that they created was 27 miles long.
Oh my goodness.
Represented millions of acts of kindness. You can imagine little pieces of paper going 27 miles. That was Rockwall, Texas.
Okay.
And by the way, the next year after we got established in Rockwall, Texas, Family Circle magazine listed Rockwall, Texas as the #1 place in America to raise your children. And the reason they gave is because Rockwall fully adopted Rachel's Challenge in their businesses, their homes, and their schools.
So can you explain what a Friend of Rachel's Club is and how being a member provides love and support to members?
Okay. There's no membership fee to join. Anybody can join if they take a pledge. And that pledge is, I will be kind to others as Rachel was kind to others. They then must adopt her codes of life and write their own code of life from hers. In other words, read hers, but they have to adopt their own codes of life. Then they join we do a training for 90 minutes to kick the club off. We usually have about 100 students there. More students always want to come, but we have to limit it because you can only train so many. After the training, any young person in the school that wants to be a part can. And we have schools where every student in the school is a part of the Rachel's Club, Friends of Rachel Club. We call them FAR clubs because the Friends of Rachel is the acronym. So we are for things, not against things. So we train them in how to do the Rachel's Closet, the Rachel's Pantry, all of those things. We give them plenty of material to start with. And then they're on their own after that. But the clubs, we've gone to schools 12 and 13 years ago and not been back. The clubs are still operating today, full swing. We recommend that they have us come back about every 4 years to get that inspirational piece again. But we know that the clubs have longevity. And so they take, and then we encourage them to create their own acts of kindness. So we hear stories all the time that just blow our minds of clubs that create their own acts of kindness in their community, for the elderly, for the homeless, for, all kinds of things.
So tell me a little bit about you. What have you done? What kind of a career have you had? I mean, what business were you in? What has your life been like before the tragedy?
Well, I was born in poverty in Louisiana in a one-room shack with no plumbing. My dad was a minister in a small church, and we were just dirt poor. I remember my toys were canned goods that were donated to us for our meals. Play with those cans like I would roll them like cars when I was 5 or 6 years old. And one time I took all the labels off the cans. I wasn't thinking. And my mother was so angry at me because she never knew what we were going to have for dinner, whether it was going to be dog food or meat. Then as I got older, my dad became a minister in bigger churches. I went to a Bible college when I was young and became a minister and was a pastor of several churches until around my 30s. And I realized that I was not happy with that. My thinking was broader than my denominational boundaries. And so I don't put down religion, but I'm not a religious person. I think there's a big difference between religion and spirituality. I've been more impacted by people like Eckhart Tolle, Carl Jung, one of my favorites. There's just been a lot of old writers and philosophers. Tao Te Ching has been a big part of my life, but I'm not connected to any religious group at all. So I got out of ministry in my 30s, didn't know what I was going to do because all I knew how to do was speak. And I started painting. My brother and I created a painting company. And then I got into sales, and I did sales and was very successful at that for a while, food sales. And then when Rachel died, I was planning to go back to work. I was a manager at a food company, and the doors continued to open for speaking. And I looked back on my life and realized that I had been prepared with other careers for what I was doing. And I've always been a student. I have over 4,000 books in my library, and I've always been an avid reader. I think that helped Rachel with some of her thinking because I've always encouraged my children to question things. The Socrates method. Why did we do this? And so the last 25 years of my life has been helping on Rachel's channel.
Very interesting life you've had. I would suspect that you touched a lot of lives as well throughout the years.
Well, I hope so.
You gave her a good foundation, and that's something to be very proud of.
So if anyone in our audience would like to contact you to learn more about Rachel's Challenge, how do they do that?
They can go to rachelschallenge.org, RACHELS challenge.org. And by the way, there's a new book that just came out called Rachel Joy Scott, Her Life and Legacy. It's on Amazon. So anyone that wants to read about, and there's over 60 QR codes. So there's a lot of videos that people can watch. It's Rachel Joy Scott, Her Life and Legacy from Amazon.
And that just came out not too long ago, huh?
Yeah, just a couple months ago.
Okay.
Wow.
How many books have been written about this dude?
There's over 40 books that have her story, part of her story in them. Not by me, but by different authors. And I have personally written 5, but one is geared for schools. One is geared for the general public that's got more about her faith in it. And then the first 3 were written early on after her death. One of them was a bestseller called Rachel's Tears. I've written 17 books total, but they're not all about Rachel. I've written a couple of poetry books, and then I've also written some philosophical books on some of the stuff we've talked about today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And
it's been incredibly
very moving and inspiring.
Yeah.
Yes, it has. Yes. And I've learned a lot too. So I appreciate what you give of yourself to keep the memory alive.
Well, thank you.
Thank you to our esteemed guest, Darrell Scott, and thank you, as always, Karolyn and Dr. Chris, for this very important interview. What is essential is invisible to the eye. We've certainly seen that powerfully illustrated today. I'll be back with a takeaway. You're listening to Zuzu, All Grown Up.
Do you know someone who is earning their wings? Someone practicing kindness and service to others? Perhaps an organization or initiative helping make the world we live in a kinder, sweeter place.
Or maybe you've witnessed the miraculous, the divine, the magnificent in some way in your life and you'd like to share it with others. Go to zuzunetwork.com/tellmystory and let us know more.
You may end up being featured on an upcoming episode of Zuzu All Grown Up. That's zuzunetwork.com/tellmystory. Now here's Seth Kennedy with today's parting thoughts.
It's been 25 years since the Columbine High School shooting that claimed the lives of 13 people, 12 students, and 1 teacher. On the surface, it doesn't look like we've come very far in all the years since. High school shootings have become a trend in our country. Politicians have talked much and delivered little. But Darrell Scott, the outspoken father of the first victim of the Columbine tragedy, Rachel Joy Scott, offers us real and concrete hope. He offers us hope because he himself chose hope and shows each of us that we can too. With that magic 4-letter word, we can turn tragedy into triumph, even if they are small triumphs, because collectively they will make a loud, thunderous sound in both the visible and invisible world that surrounds us. Invisible, a word that Mr. Scott made us think about, a word that represents everything that we love, including love itself, and everything we fear, including fear itself. If we can have victories in that invisible world, victories we will never see or hear about on the news, but that will change individual lives in the most profound of ways, we will be able to say that every day things are getting better because we are committed to making them better. I believe that was Rachel Joy's message as well, and the chain reaction she started, and that we can continue. I leave you with 2 quotes. The first one that Darrell Scott has oft quoted in his speeches. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. From the book, The Little Prince. And one from an editorial to an 8-year-old girl in 1897. You tear apart the baby's rattle and see what makes the noise inside. But there is a veil covering the unseen world, which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived could tear apart. Only faith, poetry, love, and romance can push aside the curtain and view the picture, the supernatural beauty and glory beyond. Is it all real? Virginia. In all this world, there is nothing else real and abiding. That's from the Chicago Times. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. And if you read in the time, like Papa said, it has to be true.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Zuzu All Grown Up.
We hope you've been inspired to live your most wonderful life now and to help those around you do the same.
Remember, no matter what you're going through, no matter who you are, there are people who care about you and your life makes a difference.
It is a wonderful life.
Check out zuzunetwork.com for more on today's and other episodes, including transcripts and merchandise you won't want to be without.
New episodes are coming soon.
For transcripts of today's broadcast, go to zuzunetwork.com/transcripts. Zuzu All Grown Up with your hosts Karolyn Grimes and Dr. Chris Brunell.
Announcer and guide Seth Kennedy.
Executive producer Kevin R. Stillmock.
Coordinating producer Holly Ann Way.
Technical producer Stella Joelle.
A Wonderful Land production.
In collaboration with Radio Wonderful.